Okay, good morning, good morning. We're going to learn. We're up to the two dots on Yud Aleph Amid Aleph, the Omar Rava Bar Machasya. So the Gemara over here seems to discuss some somewhat random halachas, but first of all, they're all by the same Amayra, Rava Bar Machasya, Amar of Chama Bar Guria, and it all goes back to Rav. So what did he say? Kol ir shegagoisel gevayim mibeis haknesses. Any city that allows, now the assumption is that in the olden days that the zoning was in the hands of the Rabbanim and the hands of at least the Fruma people, and they were allowed to legislate any laws or any rules about how high and how tall various buildings can be. So the halacha is that the shuls should be higher than any house. But if there was a city that was not called any city where they did not adhere to this, and the private homes were taller, the roof of the house was taller than the shul, l'soif chareva. So eventually it would be destroyed. Shenema, like the pasuk says, l'roimim beis alikenu lahamed es charvoisav, that we should raise up the shuls. Don't forget that today we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, so the pasuk says in Cheskel va'ei lahem mikdash ma'at, that our mikdash ma'at, our microcosm, our temporary or example of a Beis Hamikdash, the microcosm Beis Hamikdash, the tiny Beis Hamikdash, is supposed to be the real Beis Hamikdash. We have to have, just like the Beis Hamikdash was the tallest of the buildings, so should a shul be. Everybody knows that in Eretz Yisrael, the bells of Beis Hamikdash can be seen from many places in Eretz Yisrael. They Bedafka built it so tall that it can be seen from all over places. So,
Rabbi Feitman?
Yes, yeah, Rabbi, good morning.
Mahavdil, if you go to Eretz Yisrael and you pass these small Arab towns, the tower, the minaret of the church is always the tallest figure, right, the tallest structure in the town.
Right.
They still do it.
Seems like they got it from us also, even though today they're more machmir than we are, on this halacha. Because we have, unfortunately, quite a few buildings these days that are taller than the shuls. But in the towns, that's why I mentioned the towns where they followed halacha completely. So the shul was always the tallest structure. Now we'll see in a minute. So the Gemara says, "V'hani mili bebatim." That's only private houses and regular houses where you can use the roof. Avo bekishkushe. But if we're talking about the roofs of forts and stam towers, so then there's no issue. Les lamba, it doesn't matter, because since it's not used, so we don't mind if it's a little bit taller than the shul. Now, in a little while, if we have a chance at the end, as we do when we're together in the shul, in the Beis Hamedrash, this is maybe a reminder to us to be a little bit, I'm sure we all are, unhappy that we're not in shul, and we should yearn. We should have gaguim v'kisufim to go back to shul. We shouldn't get a little bit too complacent that we're home and we're not in the shul. So Amar Rav Ashi said, "Ano Avdil Masa Mechasya Charva." That Rav Ashi said, Rav Ashi was the Rav of the place called Masa Mechasya. By the way, just as an aside, the word Masa means a city. So there's a very interesting machlokes today when you write a ksuba or you write a get, if you have to write the word Masa. Not only is there a machlokes, but there's a machlokes what Rav Moshe Zatzal said. Somebody recently told me, I was writing a ksuba, that Rav Moshe, because I write, for instance, in Brooklyn, I write Brooklyn, New York, and in Cedarhurst I write Cedarhurst, New York. So somebody told me that Reb Moshe wrote Masa. But somebody else told me that Reb Moshe didn't. So it turns out I asked Reb David Feinstein recently. Reb David's been, by the way, our major pasuk in this whole Corona Maisa. We've been quoting Reb David left and right, and everybody's been talking to Reb David. And poor Reb David is exhausted from. He's a little bit over 90, if I'm not mistaken, right now. But Reb David told me that his father did write Masa. So I started writing Masa in Ksubas right before the word, and it seems from this Gemara that it was called Masa Mechasya. So Masa means city. So it's the city of Mechasya. So anyway, to be brief about it, Rav Ashi said that I would when I planned the city of Masa Mechasya, so I made sure that it would never be destroyed. So the Gemara asked because he said that all the shuls were higher than any of the private houses. So Gemara said, "V'achareva," but Masa Mechasya was once destroyed. So it seems that it's not a protection. So he answered him, or the Gemara answered, that it would not be destroyed. There's an avera. The avera is if somebody has a private house that's bigger than the shul, so it's a chutzpah towards the shul. It's a chutzpah towards the Beis Hamedrash, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's home is the Beis Hamedrash and the Beis HaKnesses. But on the other hand, it could be destroyed because of other averas. We're dealing now not with destruction of shuls, chas v'shalom, but we're dealing with not being able to be in the shuls. We also have to do a little bit of a cheshbon hanefesh why we're not allowed to be in the shul. V'amar Rav bar Mechasya, Amar Rav Chama bar Gurya, Amar Rav. So he said like this: Tachas Yishmol v'li Tachas Nochri. So we were talking about Reb David mentioned about the Yishmaelites that have their towers, and they go higher than than any private house. So Tachas Yishmael. So we had good relations with the Yishmaelim for many centuries, basically until it became Muslims. So it's better to work for a Yishmaelite and not to work for a Nochri. Now, who's a Nochri? So most of the Rishonim learn that a Nochri over here means from Esav. So Esav is apparently worse than Rashi says Admoinim Sheyirushoyim Yosef. It's very interesting how Rashi's meduyik. Rashi agrees that they're both bad. Yishmaelim are bad and Esav is bad. So there are many historians that discuss this question also. Who was worse over the centuries, the Muslims or the Christians? The answer is they're both bad. But the Gemara over here thought that the Esavniks, the Edomites, which basically means the Christians, were worse. Then Tachas Nochri, it's better to work even under an Esav person, an Edomite. V'loi Tachas Chabor. So who's a Chabor? So Rashi says they were Persians. So the Persians apparently were very they were people that would get into fights very easily, and you look him in the wrong way, and he's going to start to fight with you and beat you up. So it's not a good idea to work for such a person. Tachas Chabor, but it's still better to work under one of those guys. Tachas Talmud Chacham. Now this seems very strange, right? Talmud Chacham was worse, but the Torah says now it turns around, because as we'll see in a minute, by orphans and widows, Rashi says that if you do something wrong to them, chas v'shalom, and they cry, either a Talmud Chacham, you insult the Talmud Chacham by accident, or a v'loi tachas Yosem v'Almana, the Gemara says, and you shouldn't be involved with Yisaimim, with orphans and Almanas. So it's very interesting. I know that many Rashi Yeshivas, Gedolei Yisrael, when they had a Yosem in the yeshiva, we had in yeshiva a number of times. So the Rosh Yeshivas, the Mashgichim, everybody were very on. They tiptoed around a yasam, because if you insult a yasam, you cause him to cry. So the Torah says that Yitzhak, if he cries, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu punishes the one, even if it was a very minor thing. So Rosh Yeshivas very often were reluctant to even give mussar to a yasam. And the Mashgichim used to give mussar to the Bachrim if we weren't kind to a boy, even if he had, let's say, he had a mother, but his father was nifter, or vice versa. That's still a yasam.
Doesn't Hashem take over for that parent? Sorry. Hashem takes over for the
right.
parent, so you're insulting his child.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly. He also said, Kol chayli, it's best to have any disease, le'olenu, but not a disease of the stomach. So this seems to be a very serious illness, but it also means that a person that le'olenu has stomach problems, so he has to spend a lot of time in the bathroom, and he can't learn, he can't daven. Kol ka'ev, any pain is better, v'loi ka'ev, leiv, but not heart pain. Because apparently the heart, since the heart is the center of all of the organs, so if somebody has heart problems, he can't function. Any even a minor ache, but not a headache, because again, a person who has a headache, he can't learn Torah. But any bad thing, but the person should not suffer from a bad woman, because a bad woman can ruin your life. So over here, what the Mefarshim say is that a person should be very careful when going into a shidduch, either for himself or for his children eventually, not to look at surface things. The Mefarshim say over here, you should be very careful not to look at beauty, not to look at money, not to look at yichus, because ultimately what matters is her midas. Something a little bit that's kind of like lost in the current shidduch atmosphere that we have.
Don't we say Mar Mimavis? It's worse than death.
Bad woman. Exactly. Right. Right, yeah. Matzah isha matzah toiv, but matzah and isha ma'amimovus. We had in the Gemara. V'Omar Rav bar Machashu. What else did he say? Omar Rav Chama bar Guya Omar Rav said, Im you kol hayamim diyoi. So now this is something that we say. The author of Nishmas borrowed this. If all the seas were black ink, v'agamim kumosim, and all of the an agam means very often like a place where there are reeds. So all of the reeds would be kumosim. We could make them into pens, into quills for Shemaim Yeriyos, and all of the Shemaim were parchment. You could write on the entire Shemaim, the Chobani Adam Lablorim, and everybody would be a cipher. So you would not be able to write down all the things that the government does. Now, for instance, right now, any of us that are involved, and we're all involved in making these communal decisions. There's decisions and many nuances. So the government, if it's mayors or governors or especially presidents and kings, so they have to make many communal decisions, and there's so many layers. So Rashi learns that therefore you need a heart. And it all has to very often be done in one day, Rashi says, and there's also wars. So it seems over here that it's mostly national leaders like presidents, etc. So that's one pshat. The other pshat is that they are so devious that we have to watch out for them. In other words, there's a positive and there's a negative over here. So he says, so chalala can mean go both ways. It could mean how wide is the things that they have to do, and on the other hand, it's how deep is their deception. In other words, you can't trust them at all. So Gemara says, where do we see this in the pasuk? That v'leiv malachim ein cheker. This is not that famous pasuk of v'leiv malachim b'yad Hashem. That's a different pasuk. But the minds of kings can't even be understood because we don't know all the things that the king has to do. So from this part of the pasuk, it seems that it's only mamish kings and people that have an entire country under their jurisdiction. We have a chance, we'll go back over this. Now we're going to talk about Chalomis a little bit. At the end of Masechta Brachos, everybody remembers the list, Parak Haraya, that we learned. So we were talking about Chalomis. So over here it says, Yafa Tainis L'Chaloim, that by the way, the Farshim derived from the way that this Gemara begins Yafa, that it's good to fast if one has a bad dream, that it's not a chiyuv. The Magen Avraham brings this la'alacha in Chumash, not in Chumash, from a pasuk that in Shulchan Aruch that there's no chiyuv to fast. Other poskim disagree with him, but he says that it says Yafa over here. It's very effective. It's a good thing to have to fast for a bad dream. Ke'esh l'na'oris. So it's as good as putting out a fire that starts off on flax. Flax burns very easily. So a chalaim also takes off if a person has a very bad dream and then he fasts. It takes off the bad effects of the dream. So Amr of Chisda qualified this. He said only by B'yom. That's only if it's the next day. So let's say a person has a bad dream on Monday night, so he has to fast on Tuesday. The next day, it's not so effective. Amr of Yosef Afilu b'Shabbos, so he has to fast even on Shabbos. So this is a famous halacha. I'm just going to take a drink. Rabbi say, I mentioned that you can answer Amr if you want because it's live. So this halacha of fasting on Shabbos, so it's taka mutter. There's no question about it. It's okay, and a person has a right to do it. Maybe even an obligation according to some poskim, but then he has to fast another day, not Sunday. Doesn't fast 2 days in a row, but he fasts on Monday. And then Yosef, Tainis L'Tanisa, the Shulchan Aruch says he has to fast because he fasted. So it wasn't his fault. He had a bad dream Friday night. But the Gemara says that since the Rabbi put it on him that he should fast on Shabbos, it was a bad sign for him. So yeah, he has to fast, and then he has to fast because of the Aveira of fasting on Shabbos. He wasn't Mekayim Einik Shabbos. Now the Gemara tells a story about this. Rabbi Yeshua Bered Rav Idi, Iklol Be Rav Ashi. He came to the house of Rav Ashi of the Iklol Tilsa. So they made for him either a third-born calf, or Rashi brings another pshat that it means a calf that's born. It was the first calf to its mother, so that's not so good. The second calf is a little bit better, and the third one is more sumptuous, is more delicious. Others said that it was not yet older than a third of its whatever its life is going to be. So that's the optimum time to eat it. So Amrullah said, they said to him, Lita Marmidas, he wasn't eating anything. So they brought him a very, something very, very chashuv, and he wouldn't eat it. So he told them, he said, I'm fasting. So even though the Rishonim bring over here that a person should not tell people when he's fasting if it's not a regular tiny sibur, because it's like it's mechzik yuara. It looks like arrogance. But over here he had to tell them because, he wasn't allowed to eat. So Amrullah, so they said to him, don't you hold like Rav Yehudah? Apparently everybody holds like this Rav Yehudah. You can borrow on your fast, meaning don't fast that on a certain day. You can fast on another day, and you'll pay it back. Just like we just said now about Mesiv Tainus L'Tanisai, that you have to fast another day. If you fast this, it's the opposite. You decided that you want to fast a day. So most Rishonim say that if you decide to fast on a certain day, you can't give it up. But if you decide to fast on one day of the month, then you're allowed to push it off. So remember, we once learned that the Brisker Rav holds that the reason that we do fast on Asara B'Tevis, even if it's a Friday, and even if it would fall on Shabbos, it doesn't fall on Shabbos, but if Asara B'Tevis would fall on Shabbos, we would fast, is because it says in the Pasuk Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh that when Nebuchadnezzar surrounded Yerushalayim, the siege of Yerushalayim, so he did it on the very day of Asar B'Tevis. What about all the other Tanaisim? So they are only the fast of the month. In other words, during the month of, let's say, even Av, or the month of Tammuz, bad things happen, and the Chachamim, really the Nevi'im, were Geyser Atainis, but it was a certain day that they picked. So if it's not going to be that day, it'll be another day. Nishkefelach, it's not so terrible to push it off. So over here, it's really, that's even a Tainus Tzibur can be pushed off. So over here, we're talking about even a private Tainus. So they asked him, how come you can't push it off? Amalu Tainus Chaloimu. They said, I'm fasting because of a bad dream. And a bad dream you can't push off. How do you know? Again, we go back to this famous statement, the Yafatinus L'chaloim Ke'esh like that, it takes off like we put out a fire, so a fast puts out the fire of the dream. Rav Chisda said, you have to fast that day. He said, even on Shabbos. So it seems, again, from this whole thing, that a fast that comes because of a bad dream has to be that day, otherwise it doesn't have the effect that we want it to have. Now the Mishnah had also said him his chilu a mafsiket. Now we have a whole machlokes about what that Mishnah meant. The Mishnah was talking about that if a person started certain activities, so he doesn't have to stop in order even to daven. So where it says that the Mishnah said mafsikin l'kriyashma, but you have to interrupt what you're doing for kriyashma, but not for davening. So the Gemara asks now, how come it said again the same thing, that mafsikin a mafsikin l'tefillah, but mafsikin l'kriyashma. Hatan l'reisha a mafsikin already said in the reisha of the Mishnah the same thing. So Morah says no. Seifa still l'divrei Torah. The Seifa was not talking about the same subject. It was talking about if you stop learning. The Sanya we learned in a Brisa did what we're doing now, even though it's on Skype and it's everybody's in their house. But chayverim shayu Torah. If you have a group of people that are learning together, they're learning Torah, mafsikin l'kriyashma. So kriyashma is a deraisa apparently. So you have to interrupt, stop learning. Mafsikin l'tefillah. But tefillah, you don't stop. You keep learning. So we had all sorts of discussions about this. We're going to continue now a little bit. But the shaila is, what do you do, Taka? It came, like, let's say, when we're in shul, so we stop at 8 o'clock and we go to daven, those that didn't daven yet. So Amr Rabbi Yochanan said, this, that you don't stop learning, that's only in the days of Reb Shimon ben Yochai and he himself, all they did was learn. They didn't have any jobs or anything. Yom v'layla they learned. Now the Gemara says now the Gemara is Amoraim obviously. So we're saying that even in the time of Amoraim they weren't like the Tanaim of Reb Shimon ben Yochai. And if you remember, even by Reb Shimon ben Yochai, so he was only the one that learned Yom v'layla. He never ever interrupted. So in other ages there were people like the Vilna Gaon in the 1700s and the Chazon Ish in the early 20th century that learned Yom v'layla, and they had certain kinds of halachas that they didn't have to interrupt. But going on, it seems from the Gemara that even then they understood already that they were not like the Tanoim and like Reb Shimon ben Yochai, and we have to be mafsik if we're learning. Our learning is not on that level. We have to stop and daven. Going on. So but people like ourselves, feel we have to stop for both Kriyas Shema. Like we said, everybody had to stop. Even if Shema Yechoy had to stop to say Kriyas Shema because it's a deraisa. But Tefillah, so we have to stop and daven normally. So where it says, is that really true? Vasanya, didn't we learn Kishem Shein Mafsikin L'Tefillah? Just like a person doesn't interrupt for davening, Kachem Mafsikin L'Kriyas Shema. So then the Raisa seems to say the exact opposite. You don't even stop for Kriyas Shema. So Gemara explains, no. Kitana hi be'ibur shana. When do we not stop? Now we don't do ibur shana anymore, but in the olden days when they had to decide, they were sitting in conference and they were deciding whether or not to add an adar. Now today we have calendars and it's all figured out for us from thousands of years ago. But in those days, the Amar of Adar Barahav V'chintanu Sabed Agrunya. So all these elders, the elders of Agrunya, they said in the Bais, Amar of Elazar of Tzaddik, Kishayinu Oiskim Be'ibur Shana B'Yavna. When we used to sit in Yavna, we used to decide whether or not we should add a month of Adar and Adar Sheni. We didn't stop because that was so important. Apparently, it was for Klal Yisrael, so we didn't stop at all. I mean, I can tell you only because the last couple of days we had many very, very heavy meetings of the Rabbanim, together with consultations with the doctors, what to do. Close the shuls, don't close the shuls, have outdoor minyan, don't have outdoor minyan. And these are very, very serious issues. So we didn't stop. We stopped for mincha, but believe me, we didn't stop for hours and hours. One meeting was, I think, 3.5 hours long, and people came and went a little bit. Most people stayed throughout the meeting. Then at the end, we had a decision. Although the next
Rabbi,
day, the next day things changed. We had another decision. What Yitzhak?
Rabbi, it's interesting that Reb Shimon bar Yochai is the one to mention that he stopped for Kriyas Shema. He was in a cave for many, many years. How would he know even when the Zman is? Why pick him?
Right, yeah. So the truth is, first of all, they had Ruach HaKodesh, and at the very least, they knew the Zman Kriyas Shema. And apparently they peeked out, because there's stories about they went to check if the buxa tree was growing, if the water was still flowing. So a few times the Gemara says that Reb Shimon Yochai asked his son Reb Eliezer, who was with him for all those 13 years. So they did go out a little bit to check: is it day? Is it night? Rabbi said, "We're going to have it soon." In the Haggadah that they were learning Torah all night, and they didn't know if it was morning, so they sent somebody out. That's why the Talmidim. So they always had a Talmud that went out to check for them, either Ruach HaKodesh or they looked outside.
The only thing that I would ask is, it seems like the Lashon is a little forced, because how do you call being Ibra Shana Torah rather than, let's say, Din?
Well, because the truth is it was Torah also. It was Torah and Din, David. Because the way it worked was they looked at all the factors, the socioeconomic factors. Is it a good idea to add a month? What's the climate? Is it cold? Is it hot? Is it an early spring, late spring? All these factors the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, and then they discussed the halachas. There was Torah and Din. So, but they were learning. That's considered to be learning. Okay, now let's see the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says like this. Now, these are precautions on Erev Shabbos to make sure that a person is not going to carry Chas Shalom on Shabbos. By the way, it seems that in some cities they had an Eruv. In fact, we're going to learn Mitzvah Hashem in the next Masechta in Eruvin. So Gemara says that Rabbi and Rava made an Eruv in their city. It's not a bad thing to make an Eruv. On the contrary, there are those that hold that a Rav in his community has to make an Eruv. But then on the other hand, these kinds of halachas, lo yetzi achayat, seems that in many of their communities there was no Eruv. So it could be that that's like, what we talked about the other day. Is there a Rishus Rabbim Bisman Hazeh? And are you allowed to make an Eruv in a Rishus Rabbim? Like Ramosha says, no. So, but anyway, this is the case. There is no Eruv. Lo yetzi achayat, a tailor cannot go out b'machtoi. Now we'll soon see in the Gemara, is he carrying it or is it stuck in his garment? So the Gemara is going to discuss this.
Rabbi Feitman, going back to what the Rav just said about an Eruv or not, in Eretz Yisrael, the Yeshiva Shavel, they carry, they don't carry in Yerushalayim.
Some do, some don't. I'll tell you.
Is that because they don't hold of the Eruv and Mitzias, or
no? I'll tell you what it is. The Brisker Rav had a shita that goes through today also. He got it from his father Reb Chaim. It's a Brisker shita that even a good Eruv is not good enough. You have to have walls. You have to have a complete, because an Eruv is really, we'll get into it obviously a lot.
It's a halachic issue for them, not a hashkafic issue.
No, it's a halachic issue, totally halacha.
Right.
Totally. They hold that no Eruv is good enough, because an Eruv is just like an imaginary thing. It's an imaginary wall. And the Briskers hold you have to have a wall. So until this date, like for instance, Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal did not allow an Eruv in Boston. I don't know if I think they finally made it after he was nifter. And Rav Aaron Soloveitchik didn't allow it in Chicago, but eventually they did it without him, et cetera, et cetera. But all the Briskers, that's why there is an Eruv in Yerushalayim. It's a very good Eruv, and many people use it, but many people do not. They hold, in fact, in Shulchan it seems that Baal Nefesh means like a guy that's makbid on, let's say, Chol Yisrael. That's how Rabbi terms it. Also should not use an Eruv. Using an Eruv is a heter. No, I don't want a heter. The people say I don't use an Eruv. My wife uses it. They'll say, she can push the, the stroller. I'm not pushing the stroller.
Rabbi Shlomo Zalman held of the Eruv in Yerushalayim?
Yeah, sure. Everybody held of the Eruv. The only question is, do you use it? No, there's no. I don't think anybody's ever cast aspersions on the Eruv of Yerushalayim. Okay, let's learn Rabbi Bais, because we all have to get to someplace at 8:00. So, you shouldn't go out. So even though we'll soon see that it might be that it's only a shinui. That's what the Gemara is going to talk about. It's not really carrying. That nevertheless, Shem Yishkav Yetze, because you might forget, it's Erev Shabbos right near Shabbos. And by the way, we'll talk about a very contemporary application of this mission in a couple of minutes. And a sefer shouldn't go out with his pen. Now, this seems to be a different type of halacha, that a person that has lice in his clothing, so he shouldn't try to delouse them close to Shabbos, and he shouldn't be also reading L'Or Ner. So why? Because a person might adjust the nair. In the olden days, you had to tilt it a little bit to get a little bit more light, to get a little bit more oil. That you're not allowed to do. That would be an Issa D'Oraisa. Be'emes Amru. Now most Rishonim hold that Be'emes Amru means it's Allah L'Moshe Sinai. Hachazan Roya Heichen Tanoik is Karin. That when the children, and by the way, the kids used to go to school on Shabbos. They used to learn. So the Chazan is the Rebbe that teaches them. It was usually the Shabbos of the shul. So if he's not sure that there's two pshatim and Rashi and a Rishonim. So let's say he's not sure what the parsha is, which is a pliya that he's not going to know which is the parsha. The kids, by the way, used to not learn the way we learn today, straight through Bereshit, straight through Shemais. They used to learn the parsha of the week. So a chazan roya hechem tenok is current. If he wants to know what the parsha is, he can always take a look what the kids are reading, even la'or aner, because he's not really reading; he's just glancing over. The other pshat is that to help them to read. So by them, apparently, there's no gzeira. They can read la'or aner because they're not touching the lamp. Avahu yikra, but he himself should not read by the lamp light because we're afraid that he would adjust it. Speaking of Reb David Feinstein, I once asked Reb David, if he happens to know what his father Reb Moshe held, because I thought I was sitting late one Friday night by a lamp that was on, like, a three-way, and it was on the first, I think, and I was looking, boy, I wish I had a little bit more light because I can't see this little sefer. So I thought to myself, oh, maybe we should make a gzeira that you can't sit by such a lamp that has a three-way bulb because you might have to adjust it, and this is just like this lamp. So Reb David said he once asked his father Reb Moshe. Reb Moshe said that's a new gzeira, and we don't make new gzeiras. So I didn't understand. I thought that maybe it's the same gzeira. I said it's not really a new gzeira. So David gives me a sharp look. He said, "Isaiah the tatig is okt." That's what my father said. That was the end of that discussion. So, but it seems that Reb Moshe held that if you change the venue, it's a whole new gzeira. So we're allowed to sit by such a lamp, but you can't sit by a lamp that you would have to actually tilt, and that would be a deraisa. I thought this is also a deraisa, but I think maybe the reason that he said it was because Reb Shlomo Zalman, speaking of Reb Shlomo Zalman, Zatzal held it's not a deraisa. The Chazon Ish held that it is a deraisa to change a setting on a lamp on Shabbos. Okay, now the Gemara says, let's say that a husband and wife, one is a zav, and the other one might be a zava, or only one. Doesn't have to be both. Because when they're eating together, and one, that's how we make a gzeira also by when our wives are nidas, you have to have a hecker, because the hecker is a reminder that she's a nida. Otherwise, it might come to intimacy. Now let's see the Gemara. The Gemara says Tanan Hossam. We learned in a Mishnah. So the Mishnah says in Erevin, towards the end of Erevin, it says LaYameid Adam Rishus HaYachid B'Yishna Rishus HaRabim. Let's say somebody's in his private domain and there's a water fountain, so he can't lean over and drink from the water fountain in public because he might carry some of the water. So or Rishus HaRabim B'Yishna Rishus HaYachid, or vice versa. So because we're afraid he's going to carry with a cup, he's going to carry from one domain into the other. But if most of his body is in the other rishus, so then it's mutter. So now the Gemara says, Bais, the same thing is by a wine press. If a person is drinking over there when they're pressing grapes, so he's allowed to take some of the wine. So the Gemara says, what about if it's in a carmelis? Do we still have the gzeira or not? Because the carmelis is only the rabbanon. So the question is, do we make a gzeira or not? So Rabbi said, it's the same gzeira by a derabbanon as by a deraisa. Rabbi disagrees. Rabbi amahibu the gzeira. The whole thing was a gzeira. The anan nekum gzeira. We should make another gzeira that seems to be a raya from here to what Reb David said in the name of Rabbi that even if you're changing it slightly, it's still a new gzeira. So Rabbi said, how do I know that it's still usher even in a carmelistic katani? Because we learned that the same thing is by a wine press. So a wine press means that my gas, where is it? So Tanina. If it's a Rishus HaYachid, we learned that you're not allowed to do it leaning over. Rishus HaRabim, if it's a Rishus HaRabim, Tanina, we also learned that it's usher. Elav b'carmelis. Elav carmelis. So it must be a carmelis. And the carmelis is also, that was Abaya's rayim, that that it's the same thing, same gzeira is in a derabbanon area, which is a carmelis. So Rava, who held that it doesn't apply to a carmelist, what did he hold? Rava Amar, v'chein begas linya meiser. We weren't even talking at all about that. Halacha was not about carrying on Shabbos. The shaila was over there about, do you have to take off meiser in a wine press? So what does that mean? Because normally a wine press is not the final, it didn't go into the barrel yet or anything. So the halacha, according to Rava, was that you didn't have to take off trumas or maestris when you're drinking from the wine press because it's not really finished yet, and the only time you have to take off trumas and maestris is when it's all finished and it's all in a barrel or in bottles. V'chem Rav Sheshes, v'chem begasli in your meiser. Rav Sheshes said the same thing, and he proved it from a Mishnah. This now we learned in a Mishnah, Shoysen Agas, a person can drink wine over the wine press, ben al cham and ben al tzoinen, upater, and If it's diluted with hot water, it's not diluted with hot water. So he does not have to take off different meisers or truas or meisers, both of them. Different remeir. That's remeir holds. Rabbi Lazar b'tzadik mechayev. He holds that you do have to take off, and the very fact that you added water means that it's finished. That's the way you drink it, because in the olden days the wine was too potent. It was too strong to drink right away. So as soon as you added water, that means that it's final. That's in its final state, and you have to take off trumas and meisers. The Chacham make a distinction between the hot and cold dilution. So alachamin, if you're pouring in hot water, and then you have to take off meiser, because that's already a final statement. That's the final act. Because if it's still cold and you didn't finish, you're going to pour some back into the wine press. Now, you didn't drink from it like from your mouth. Today we're all sensitive about this, but you put it into a cup. Okay, so now we learned in the Mishnah, what did the Mishnah say? So the tailor can't go out, so we're afraid he's going to go out. So isn't the case over here that they used to all walk out, the tailors, like we've seen these kind of tailors, the old tailors, the old Jewish tailors, Italian tailors, that their needle was stuck into the garment, and then he pulled it out when they needed it. So the chayra, that's carrying with a shinui, and that shinui means that we're making a gzeira even on the shinui, and that's still usur. Morah says, "Loi, the naked lebiyada." He's really holding it in his hand. So since he's holding it in his hand, so the gzeira is an absolute gzeira on a deraisa, and therefore you're not allowed to go out. We're afraid he's going to carry it on Shabbos if he's carrying it right before Shabbos. Tashma will bring a proof to this.
So it's usur for him to walk in the street with the needle pinned in.
Yes. So we'll soon see that because for him that's normal. That the Gemara is going to say later on that for one of us, I'm not a tailor. If I stuck it into my garment, it would be a shinui. But for a tailor, it's not a shinui. But we'll get into it in a minute.
So when we used to have the key, the tie-clipped keys.
Right.
Why is that? Why isn't that? Why is that different?
Because I'll tell you why.
They're a chavush?
Yeah, no, it's derech levush, but it's a tashmish. Again, people don't use tie clips anymore. But when they use tie clips not on Shabbos, so it was mutter because the tie clip accomplished something. It became a tashmish levush. It became a levush in and of itself. It became something that becomes a part of the tie.
But the needle doesn't become a tashmish because it's also to use.
You're just carrying it to get it someplace.
Okay.
So now let's see the Gemara. Tashma, the Gemara says, let's bring a proof. So our Mishnah didn't make clear what was happening with the needle, but the Bais does. The Bais says that it was attached. So when it says, "My love, Erev Shabbos," isn't this the case on Erev Shabbos? And yet we saw that you can't go out even if it's attached. Where it says, "Look, that's not the case." Kitani Shabbos. The shaila is, can you go out like on that on Shabbos? So the Chatchila, you can't go out like that on Shabbos. But Erev Shabbos, you could go out. And even in a worst case scenario, let's say the Gemara thought that a person might forget that he might walk around with that on Shabbos, so they thought it's a shinui. Gemara says, "Vasanya, didn't we learn in a brayso? You're not even allowed to go out like that on Erev Shabbos, close to Shabbos, because you're going to end up walking around like that on Shabbos." But it says, no, Hamani Rabbi Yehudah, that's what I mentioned before, that a professional who goes out like that, we'll see another couple of examples of this in a minute. So the Stani we learned in the Brisa, a tailor can't go out with the needle, and a carpenter with his ruler behind his ear. We've seen this many times by in the olden days at least, by different even the CPAs used to have a pencil under their today it's not seen, but a pencil under their ear. And a person that his job was to comb out the fibers so that they would be fluffed out. So he used to carry like some kind of a some say it's like a comb or a brush that was for this, and some say it was a cord. So v'loy gardi be'ira shebaoznai, and then a weaver used to also have something that was like a stopper. It was to stop the pieces of what he was weaving from falling out. Right? And a dyer, a person that is dyeing things, he wants to show them blue, green, red. So he used to have like a swatch that was something to show people. So he also used to carry that behind his ear or on his shoulder. So and a money changer used to also have it behind his ear. Now Gemara says Vim Yatza, and if any of them did go out, but Revel also. Lechatchil, you're not allowed to do it. The Rabbi Meir, it's Rabbi Meir holds. Rabbi Yehudah says, if it's a professional, it's chayiv. But everybody else is potter. Now the Gemara brings a Stephen Bryce. Now Azov, a person that has an emission from his male organ, so he's not allowed to go out with a pouch that either he's using it to check himself, or we'll see later on that he wears it to protect himself. But if he goes out, it's potravel also. The other Raisa says, Lo Yaitze, he's not allowed to go out. He's mamish deraisa. So the rest of the Rav Yosef Lekash, it's not a stira. Or Rav Meir, so this is Rav Meir. Rav Meir holds that if you carry like that it's not a deraisa. Or Rabbi Yehudah holds that it is a deraisa. So the Gemara says no, that's not really a good answer, because Amalei Abai said to Rav Yosef, when do Rav Meir hold that he's potter b'midi to lav hainu urche, when it's something that nobody would do, even himself wouldn't carry like this. But b'midi hainu urche, but if it's normal, like the Zav wears this pouch thing, so mishametle, would Rav Meir hold that it's mutter? Of course not. So, by the way, I just want to mention that therefore, because of this, out of an Eruv, there's a big shaila if a woman can go out with wearing a tampon, because the tampon, if the purpose is, let's go before the tampon. Let's say, can she put in a moch ben hashmashis? So let's say right before Shabbos she puts in a moch, and then later on she's going to check it. So then it's not really protecting her. The only reason, she doesn't really expect to be bleeding. So the only reason she's wearing it is to check herself. That would be called carrying. So now the Gemara says that if it's to protect, then it's mutter. That let's say a person is not a professional. He carved out a kav-sized hole in a log. So he's not a professional. He's just playing around. So wouldn't he be chayiv? So even though he didn't do it normally, but of course he's still chayiv. That's an isser. Maybe it's a deraisa, maybe it's only the rabbanon, but it's for sure usser. So Gemara says, therefore, if he's waiting to see if he had a third emission, so then we say that since he has to carry it, so it's considered to be normal for him, and it's us, so he's not allowed to carry it. He can't go out on Shabbos. He's going to have to stay indoors, like all of us are. At least I'm confined indoors. So kan bezov bal sholosh riyos. But if you already had 3 riyos, so he knows that he has the halacha bezov. So at that point already, so he's just carrying it because he as we'll soon see, he doesn't want to get soiled. So Morah says, so he says, well, the guy that had 2 and he's waiting for 3, so just like the woman with the moch, so she wants to know if she's a nida. So so even if there's 3, because he's got to figure out to start counting his 7 clean days, what we call by a woman the zayin nikiyim. Tomorrow says, so we're talking about the same day. He's not going to start counting yet until the next day. So the only reason that he's carrying it, therefore, is he doesn't really need it. So then, if he doesn't really need it, it's not an issa deraisa. It's patu aval also. So Gemara says, now we said, like the woman, why is she wearing a tampon? If it's a tampon, she's wearing it because she doesn't want to soil herself. She's afraid she's going to bleed. So even on that day, so the Zav needs it to protect himself. So he should be chayiv. So Gemara says, that's not a problem, because this now we learned in a mission, it was like just like she's allowed to carry her tampon. It's not really carrying. It's not a kaifik or a kaisel. If somebody turns over a plate on a kaisel, so why did he do it? We'll soon see in a minute. It's raining, and it dripped from the plate onto some fruit. So the shaila is, so in bishul shetu dacha ka'ara, if he put the plate over there so that it should be rinsed by, it's like instead of putting it in the dishwasher, he put it over there, and now it's going to get washed. Hareza b'chiyutan, he wants it to get wet, and therefore, if he wants it to get wet, so the peiros also, where the peiros get wet, he wanted the rain, so it's called kiyutan, and since he wanted the rain, so it's considered to be that it's going to become tameh, because there's a halacha by the Tumas Eichlim that it's only considered to be tameh from water that went on the fruit if the person wanted it. So if he wanted it, but in bishvil, it's going to go to Amid Aleph for 1 second, then we're finished. In bishvil shaloi Yilka Kaisel, but if he's trying to protect the wall, then he really didn't want the water. Adarabba, he wanted the water to stay on the plate. He didn't want it to spill over on the fruit because then it gets the wall wet. So then it's not called kiyuta because he doesn't want the water. So I just want to mention, we always try to do al halacha. Can a person carry his siddur Erev Shabbos right before Shabbos if there's no Erev? So l'chayr, what's the problem? He's carrying it on Erev Shabbos. But since we were just afraid by everybody carrying right before Shabbos, so the Paiskim discussed this, the Mishnah Berurah, that who adin l'shar chafetzim. So Sharatzian writes over here in Reish and Bais that din pashatu bir halacha the shiur's man is chatzi shor kodim ben hashmashos. If it's a half an hour before ben hashmashos, he can carry. So if he's an imtashik for a kodim shkiyas achama, also lot says l'shus rabim kishbiyadu kol chayfet shehu. So therefore, tzarachim, how come people come right before shul and they're carrying whatever they need for shul and they're carrying sidurim? So the Mishnah Berurah writes from the name of the Magen Avram Shebizmanenu Shein Lanu Shus Rabim El Karmelis Mutulot says Bechayfetz. So that's over here in a Rishus. That's only a Karmelis. So it seems that Lamashal, those that hold that Manhattan or Brooklyn, like Ramesha, is a Rishus Rabim de Araisa. You wouldn't allow to you wouldn't be allowed to carry a siddur to go to shul or anything else. Your talis Erev Shabbos within a half an hour of Shkia, you would have to go either earlier or not carry it at all. Pillar playim, but a chiddush that an halacha that many people do not know. Everybody have a good day.
That's
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Sure.
We should be back together again very, very soon.
Amen.
A guten Tag. Have a great day.
Thank you.